All right, we are back from a pleasant lunch break. I hope that even people that were online had a pleasant lunch break in the company of Elena Monticelli from the P School of Montessori. And now we return to yet another exciting presentation from Professor Dominika Kasprowicz from the Jagiellonian University in Krakow, also director of the Willa Decjusza Association in the same city. So Dominika will talk in her capacity of leader of the cultural institution, member of So Close, that designed and implemented two of our digital tools, and she will discuss how the digital and the physical will related to each other in the case of Willa Decjusza. So the floor is yours, Dominika.
Thank you very much, Anna Maria and colleagues. First of all, let me express my gratitude to everyone that was involved in preparing this quite important and final event for the So Close project. The project that we have started actually not 3 but 5 years ago, when I believe nobody expected that the question of forced migration and the working with people who suffered very recently this traumatic experiences of being a part of a conflict would be as close to the European borders as we see it now. It was 5 years ago. We were referring back in time to the outputs or effects of the so-called refugee crisis, so this situation that we all observed at the Mediterranean Sea. That time Poland was, or at least seemed to be, quite distant from the topics and from this, let's say, challenges. The situation changed overnight this year, but I will get back to this point at the very end of my presentation. But it only proved that the forced migration is one of a few common denominators, and it's also not only the past but a future of the societies, global society and European societies. It proved to be true sooner than we thought, but at the same time we, being a part of the So Close consortium, were a bit more ready to handle it than we would have been if not being a part of the project. Saying that, I wanted to introduce you to my short presentation. Today I was asked to refer to the very particular aspect of our Willa Decjusza team's involvement into the project that is dedicated to interconnection, relation in between physical and historical and digital. Before I will present to you some of the remarks that we have had along the project, I would like to give you some overview to help you out to imagine and to answer the question, where are we and why are we a part of this project? Embedding the digital in physical space, the case of Willa Decjusza historical site. When starting the So Close project, we really wanted to add to enhancing the social cohesion throughout Europe, but mostly within the societies, the countries that have the biggest share of immigrants, the biggest share of past and present of forced migration and the people who experienced it. When we started this project, we also wanted to get into the already existing, pre-existing networks that could serve the purpose of the So Close project as vehicles, be the vehicles to deliver the tools, but also the goals, the concept, the aims of our work. When thinking of that, we eventually decided to go after and to ask to join us on board of the project cultural institutions of various kinds from various countries, places, organizations that already proved to be efficient with working with local communities, with working with storytelling, with working with the concept and praxis of forced migration. One of such institutions on the eastern border side of European Union was an NGO, an independent organization started 26 years ago in Krakow, Poland, that has its seat in a unique historical place, historical site, the Neo-Renaissance Palace on the outskirts of Krakow, UNESCO City of Culture, a place that from its very beginning was meant to be a meeting place. The Willa Decjusza itself and its beautiful surroundings, as well as the people who created it, who still manage it, were always dedicated to the concept of dialogue, openness and exchange. The recent history of this historical site started after the big renovation and reopening 26 years ago, actually is just a cherry on the top of the much bigger cake. Because the Willa Decjusza Palace and the park, it's a meeting place that has almost 500 years of history. It's as old as the buildings, beautiful spaces we are having a chance to see here in Lund, in the downtown. Quite unique place in terms of architecture and history on the south of Poland and in Central Europe. A place that you can see as a space that has a lot of stories to be told. 500 years of history on the outskirts of Europe, in the lands of never-ending struggle and conflicts. A place that was owned by the aristocratic families, the most important Polish Central European families. The place that witnessed the turmoil of the 500 years long history, but also especially the turmoil of the 20th century. It has already a lot of stories to be told. I picked up some almost random sample of stories that we tell to the visitors of Willa Decjusza, the stories that capture a public eye and attention of the people who come over to attend our events. Willa Decjusza can be seen through the eyes of the founding father, Justus Decjusz, who was the one behind the idea to build up this villa suburbana in the Renaissance time in the 1530s. He himself was an immigrant, a refugee from Alsace, who soon became a very prominent figure at the Polish court, at the royal court in Krakow. Few years later, it was Duchess Kuczkowska, also a very important persona of that time in Poland, in Krakow, a person who was famous for various reasons and very influential, but she herself was known also as the owner that for the first time opened the gardens and opened this beautiful space to the audiences, to the publicity, to the inhabitants of Krakow. We have another story that should be told when you visit or when you want to know more about the historical side of Willa Decjusza. Lubomirski family, the whole family, but also the moment when they bought the palace and they decided to decorate it with ornaments, with various kinds of decorations that were coming in from the North Africa. They were a kind of early birds of this new fashion to have the oriental elements present in the Polish mansions, Polish palaces. Princess Czartoryska, who herself at first was forced to leave Poland, leave Vienna because of political reasons. She ended up living and being active in Paris for many years. At the end of her life, she was able to come back to Poland, not independent Poland at the time, and to turn the Willa Decjusza Palace into the cultural salon, a very patriotic space that was helping the Polish independence cause. 20th century, and I'm again picking up some names, some stories out of 1,000 others. As you know, Krakow after 1939 was invaded and governed by Nazi Germany authorities, and Hans Frank had great expectations towards this place, this beautiful historical palace. He wanted to turn it into the Hitler Jugend's Academy. He never managed to do so. We were said that it was not enough time to put this theory into praxis. But of course, dissonant heritage of the 20th century still yet to be told and unveiled. Okay, I'm skipping, I'm, speeding up, reminding or recalling the name of Professor Anka, so the Polish professor of medicine, who was offered to organize a tuberculosis hospital in the premises of Willa Decjusza in the 60s and 70s of the 20th century. And again, many stories behind this, many stories behind himself, Professor Anka, and his famous activities. In the turn of the let's say the Third Polish Republic at the beginning of the 2000s, the Willa Decjusza, as I said, reopened. It was redesigned, rethought, and reconstructed, literary speaking, and turned into the place that is to serve dialogue of cultures. This laboratory of dialogue of cultures, since 26 years, has been operated by the independent NGO, and there are again many great names and great stories behind this last quarter of a century in the Willa Decjusza. Why I'm referring to the past, although I was meant to refer to the current and future aspects of digitalization and virtual reality. Because when choosing a partner for the So Close Consortium, choosing a partner that is an independent NGO handling the topic of migration, multiculturalism, dialogue, tolerance, and international exchange, by chance or not by chance, we were also choosing, or we were also invited with the beautiful luggage, with a beautiful package of already existing, pre-existing stories, rich history of the place. And when thinking of turning the past into the, let's say, digital form, no matter whether we speak about the individual experiences of people from the past or present, or we are thinking about the stories that are brought over with the history of this particular building we are working within. I believe that all we have in common, that we do have in common several the same kind of challenges. I was saying that Willa Decjusza has a rich, very long, colorful past with many stories still to be told. But we also need to be aware of that involving into projects like the So Close project, digitalizing the stories, the narratives, the even not very recent past, we still need to take into consideration another element of the framework we are operating within. This is the present. In the places like cultural institutions, you need to be aware of the context and the ongoing processes. Why? Because it can turn to be one of your biggest potentials, one of your biggest sources of ideas, and also a fuel to the engine of your project. When we think of this everyday praxis of Willa Decjusza meeting place, we speak about 200 events per year. We speak of cultural diplomacy events like roundtables, official meetings, ceremonies. We speak about ongoing programs for the writers, translators, artists, scholars at risk, so the residential programs. We speak about ongoing workshops, festivals, other events dedicated to promoting cultural diversity of the city of Krakow, the project that goes under the label New Krakowians. We need to keep in mind that this is the space also open, inviting new leaders that are coming over to attend summer academies or many other extracurricular education activities. Willa Decjusza, or cultural institution of that kind, could also have publication lines, can also have already pre-existing or planned activities in publishing. And of course, if we are talking about the place like this, if we are talking about the cultural institution, the historical site, to be used as a platform for the So Close activities, for this kind of activities, you need to keep in mind that there is an ongoing reinterpretation process of this heritage. Tours, guided tours, indoor and outdoor activities that are supposed to help us to interpret the whole heritage, the whole cultural good of the place. And saying all that, I will now try to answer the question why, in spite activities like the one provided by the So Close Consortium are a part, I would not say a tiny part because it's an important project, but it's a part of the annual activity of the Cultural Center. Why such a rich environment can be even further enriched with the content and new energy. To do so, I will refer to something I call as a framework for embedding the digital in physical space. One of the two tools Willa Decjusza has chosen to populate with the content was a virtual exhibition. We did it on purpose. We did it for several reasons, and actually because in recent years we has been challenged, or we challenge ourselves, with several, let's say, problems I believe that are in common for places or organizations like ours. When you think of exhibitions and when you think of presenting artworks and artists in the cultural space, in the space like the historical sites, probably you can think of all the discrepancies between the historical site, protected historical area, heritage areas, and the modern art galleries that are simply created to not stand on the way for an artist and the artwork to be presented. In this comparison between an open space, flexible, white, and very easily accessible places like modern art galleries are supposed to be, the historical sites, of course, appear to be a very challenging environment to present any kind of art, modern art, and artists themselves. We think of the concept and practice of being full of already pre-existing stories, decorations, elements of interiors, compared and contrasted with the emptiness of the ideal space to present artworks. We can think of this clash between something being very static, not being touched, being protected, and something that is or can be very flexible and let's say very plastic, adjusted according to the will of an artist. When we think about the challenges that we face when deciding to organize any kind of exhibition, any kind of art show in the historical site, that another topic that comes to my mind is the eagerness and capacity to start a dialogue with a past. If one decides to turn such a space into an exhibition hall, it needs to be ready to make a lot of compromises. It needs to be ready to start a dialogue and to adjust the artworks, the concepts, the narrative behind the exhibition. It would not be possible otherwise. You cannot put a nail in the wall of the historical building. You cannot, but you really want to. And you really believe that this space already full with history and stories and decorations still can and should be used by modern art, by modern contemporary artists, to be populated with the stories of present, to be contrasted with the stories coming from the past. What is also a kind of a challenge, but also a big potential in this organizing historical site as an exhibition space, is something I call interconnectivity, although it's a term taken or borrowed from the technical science, from informatics and programming. This is something I believe that is very important to be taken into consideration, because historical sites are people, of course, those from the past and those from the present. This is the architecture, and very frequently it's also the nature. And it's also the case of Willa Decjusza. So basically, to cut the long story short, this framework for embedding the digital in physical space in case of historical site needs to also take into consideration the interplay of all the elements, and the nature is one of them. Saying that, so having the historical site full of stories, having the historical site that is not even close to the dream scenario of the contemporary artist, we decided to jump into the very, very deep pool of the So Close Consortium and project, and intentionally we went for the virtual exhibition as a testing tool to let us share the stories, share the narratives and artworks that we were not fully capable of doing beforehand. So basically the big question we have had in front of us was whether the digital space is a promised land for any cultural historical site operator that is eager to contrast the beautiful past, the spectacular past, with the challenges and topics and issues of the contemporary world. So Close was not the first attempt of that kind. So I will be referring to the project at the very end part of my speech, but beforehand I want to show you our previous projects and attempts that were dancing along with the digital and the new media. What we tried successfully, I believe, in previous years was to use various means and various new technologies and these new spaces to reinterpret the history of the building, the history of Willa Decjusza, but also to present important topics important for us in alternative way. One of the projects we are very proud of is the Write the Game. This is the video game script writing academy, one and only, as far as I know, in Europe at the moment, a project that brings together people who can write, so who have a previous experience in writing, in storytelling, with game dev representatives, so game developing companies managers. This is a 2 weeks long initiative, summer workshop that enables participants to develop the scenarios of prospectus video games in a way that they are much more eager to be accepted by the game developers. Therefore, Willa Decjusza at some point, few years ago, became a crime scene, turning into a stage of a narrative video game. We find it very refreshing. We find it very new and interesting, and we hope for continuation. Another digital step we took in Willa Decjusza, and it was the child of the pandemic, dark hour of pandemic, was the virtual walk. Something quite normal, something you can find around. The alternative platform that can help you to visit this place, to see all the details in case of lockdown. But for us, it serves this virtual walk or virtual walks, because we have few of them, to recall the artistic events, exhibitions that happened beforehand as a temporary exhibitions in the palace. As I mentioned, Willa Decjusza is full of people. It's full of stories. It's full of books, poems, and so on, translated, written during the artistic residencies. 2 years ago, we made an attempt to inspire with a few individual stories and few individual artworks of our residents to inspire the students of art, of contemporary art, the intermedia department of the Fine Arts Academy in Krakow. Young people, students who were about to graduate, prepared their diploma projects, inspired by the life stories and poetry and books of our ICORN residents. ICORN is a global network of cities of refuge. Krakow is a part of it, and that time it was a Syrian and Angolian 2 female poets who were delivering and presenting their life stories and their poetry to the students. They got inspired. Eventually, we have had 13 intermedia installations that were presented to the wider audience. Some of them are still circulating around Poland. Here you see a few pictures from the installations, from the projects I told you about. All of them happened in the premises of this historical site of Willa Decjusza, so the print screen from the virtual walk. Some of the multimedia projection prepared for the interiors to keep them intact, but to fill them in with content. And after this 4 years of experimental designs in digitalizing the story and the content, we felt more or less ready to jump into the pool of a project like the So Close. Why I'm telling all that? Mostly because my prevalent feeling after 3 years of this very intense and very creative and efficient collaboration is that the tools we are handling and the whole concept of the project can really add to this big picture of the enhancing social cohesion. It can be very successful in building up networks, in helping individuals, in animating local communities. But beforehand, you need to be very careful when mapping out or pre-existing potentials and be aware of the fact that you really need to be using them in order to ensure the success of the project. This very well-designed very clear and quite easy to navigate tools that is provided, offered by the So Close Consortium. It's something that can be used by almost everyone. It's a great strength of them. But please don't be misled by their alleged simplicity. The simplicity comes from the fact that the rich histories and the rich potentials of those who are animating and populating them is the sine qua non condition for turning them into something that at the end of the day can make a real difference. You have heard this very moving and very personal presentation, I would even say a testimony of Kasia Joffe, with whom I had the pleasure to collaborate when preparing another tool for So Close project, the story map, the one developed by Willa Decjusza in Poland. And what she had said is basically something I also want to sign up under. In past few years, opening to digital world, opening to digitalization, for us, it helped us out to protect the cultural heritage and to preserve it, to promote the place and its goals, to learn new skills, to experiment, to get inspired. But it would not be so efficient, it would not be so productive if we were not beforehand aware of the richness, the complexity, if we were not aware and fully capable of navigating the know-how already existing in such an institution. So, to conclude, I would really like to invite and encourage any of our audiences, future audience participants who work with such a beautiful historical spaces, who work in, who protect, who promote, not to be afraid of making good use of this digital, quite fancy, modern vehicles, shells, to promote the present stories. Facing and matching them with the past stories, even in such beautiful but challenging environment like historical site, it's doable. We have plenty of examples. If an independent NGO in the country at the borderline with ongoing war, in the city that received over 300,000 refugees in just 3 months, if an NGO that was self-efficient for many years, maintaining such a big space, and for so many years successfully achieving its goal, was capable to do so, I believe that there are not too many obstacles that can you use an excuse not to become a next user of the So Close tools. I hope I didn't, just in time. So thank you very much, and I'm looking forward to your questions.
Thank you, Dominika. I think I'm just going to start with the online question this time, and then we can go into the audience to mix it up a little. There's one question about the engagement with the tools from the audience on site that you had. Like, how did the people interact with the tools in the physical space? Were there like screens? Were there the projections that we saw on the picture, workshops, and so on? If you can talk a little bit about that.
I mean, I described several projects. Each of them had its own dynamics, and the content has been presented in various ways. Basically, the interaction I would like to refer to is not an interaction within the virtual reality or with, the tools, the platforms, the intermedia artworks themselves. What struck us was the new types and kinds of interactions our public, at the end of the day, at the end of the exhibition, at the end of their visit, have had with the Willa Decjusza, with this exhibition space, with the full new picture, the full new environment that was created with a use of digital tools. We are not interested in turning our historical beautiful site into the virtual reality Willa Decjusza. We are trying and testing ways to enrich it with a use of modern technologies. And of course, we were providing tablets. We were providing a multimedia screens so you can touch and manipulate objects. If you were signing up for this video game, you could choose the scenarios because it was about that, trying to sort out the mystery, the question who killed and why. Of course, we are very interested in how people are using our virtual walks, because they can leave comments, they can tag places and objects they are interested in, they can pose questions online, they do so. But taken all together, what was the ultimate and the most interesting kind of interaction? What was this totally new, much more in-depth relation with the place that people thought they know, that, or they thought that they knew. That would be my answer to that.
And one follow-up question to that is, this was during one event that you organized, and then now how can visitors access these stories that still exist online? Are they somehow accessible explicitly on the site, or is it through your website, or how can they find the So Close stories?
Willa Decjusza went for 2 out of 3 digital tools provided by the So Close consortium, so the story map and the virtual exhibition. And of course, both of them are accessible online. So what we did, we include the QR codes and information about them into the materials that we provide to each and every person that visits the Willa Decjusza. Of course, you can access them via web page, but it's a kind of extra, obvious but extra thing, not maybe the most important link. We are aware of the fact that to keep this project and these tools going, we need to think of it as of a process, not as of a project. So I'm very happy and looking forward to the further collaboration with Kasia and the rest of the team. And we need to be very blunt about it. the war in Ukraine is not yet over. It will continue. Even when it ends, we will feel and handle its effects for many, many years. One of the outputs of the war is, of course, the totally changed social demographic environment of Poland and Krakow itself. So, unfortunately, but there will be plenty of stories to be told, and therefore I see the toolkit provided by the So Close Consortium as one of the most important offers to local communities whom recently have welcomed the war refugees, not only from Ukraine, but mostly from there.
Thank you. Yeah, if we have any questions on site, I will hand over the mic.
I have a question, as always. I mean, I'm a reservoir of questions that has no end. But I was thinking about the interaction during the looking at So Close specifically. So not all the many events you guys organized at Willa Decjusza, but looking at the So Close event, the Open Day event. Do you plan to reorganize such things? Because that would be a moment where the digital and the physical concretely and thematically related were organized in the same arena. Did you consider that the Open Day event for the launch of the two tools was a success from your point of view? And would you do it again? And if you do it again, would you change some things?
Mm-hmm. I mean, the Open Days and at the 4 cultural institutions that were engaged in the project were meant to give a space to test the tools that were at the time in their beta versions, let's say so. And they served this purpose perfectly. But what we learned from this Open Day was also that it won't be so efficient and so persuasive if we only offer the online access to this digital playgrounds. Therefore, it's obvious for me, for us, that continuing this important work of storytelling and matching the past and the present would demand including this mini Open Days, so mini events into each and every of our activities that has the common denominator of reinterpreting the past or working with local communities or addressing the needs of the new Krakowians, as we call our new neighbors. So I would not say that we will repeat the concept and convention of an Open Day like we did in the one we did in June 2022, but for sure we will include the mini version of and presentation of these platforms into ongoing agenda, into ongoing series of events of Willa Decjusza.
And I take advantage of one more question for you, and then we'll take a well-deserved break. But and I think we'll discuss this also in the panel, which is an upcoming point on the program. But in terms of the digital preparedness that Willa Decjusza had, I take from your presentation and obviously from our previous interactions, Dominika, that you as an organization and you personally as a director had a vision of this digital aspect for a while before the So Close project materialized. Do you feel, and I'm thinking also for the future users of the tool, so kind of your reflection on this, do you feel that you were prepared from a point of view of your understanding of what digital means and what are the options, what are the alternatives? Did you feel confident that, yes, digital tools for cultural heritage is kind of where I want Willa Decjusza to go, and we're gonna, invest in this? Or was this like an open avenue to explore whether it fits or doesn't fit with your mindset, with your vision for the future of the Willa Decjusza Association?
I'm more than sure that any historical site manager, cultural institution, or an NGO interested in using the toolkit of So Close can do it even without a prior expertise or experience in handling the digital, in being present in virtual. They are designed the way that almost anybody can easily navigate or populate with his or her contents. Of course, the previous experiences we have had gave us, let's say, more comfortable, much more comfort in picking up the tools we were interested in. But I would not say that this is a necessary thing to start with. As I said, what we like to do is to avoid the trap of understanding the new technologies as an inevitable and the best way to achieve our goals. Of course, we will be dancing this dance, we will be interacting and trying new things. But as we learned from pandemic moment, we can learn about each other and get into any kind of sincere exchange, a real dialogue. Mostly, if not only, if we have a chance of this multi-sensoric experience. We should use digital new technologies and digital tools for the purposes I mentioned at the end of the presentation: to protect, to promote, to learn new skills, to be able to experiment without, destroying the precious historical sites. What I have at the back of my head at the moment are over 300 precious historical monuments in Ukraine that were destroyed. There's a map provided by the Ministry of Culture of Ukraine where you can see the places that has been destroyed: museum, historical buildings, schools, monuments, archives, and so on and so forth. Something we think is there for good. It's not necessarily one. So we should use the tools provided with the new technologies. But if we can keep the interaction multi-sensored and in person, let's do it. Just intensify our experience and exchange with an extra part.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And one more hand of applause. And let's take a little break. Online viewers have the privilege of interacting with our technical partner, engineering, and if I'm not mistaken, with Nicola himself, leader of Work Package 3, the technical work package in the So Close project.
Yes, so specifically if you have questions about the Memory Center platform, now would be a great time to check in with Nicola in the breakout room. And we will be back here with the program at 20 minutes. And then you will also have a chance to ask more questions to the panel.